All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our reading room discussion of Story 5 of the novel year, Meathead. We have with us a guest, Neha Agarwalla, who's going to be telling us about her pandemic experience. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself first, Neha?
Sure. Hi. I'm 29 years old. I started my career in the fitness field about six and a half years ago. So I've been a fitness trainer since then. I also owned a CrossFit gym called 303 CrossFit Drive. For about 5.5 years, I ran the space, and it basically closed down on 31st October. It closed down very, very recently. And yeah, so I've been competing in CrossFit and also been a trainer at it. Yeah.
That's lovely. The fact that you have such a wealth of experience and that you're clearly so passionate about it, it's
Yeah.
very nice to know. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your pandemic experience?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it was like for most businesses, it was a little bit like fear of the unknown. Like, firstly, nobody knew what was coming. There were no sort of regulations in place. It was up to you what you wanted to do for the safety of people. So, firstly, when we closed down in the beginning, I think the first lockdown was 7 months for gyms. Like, I think the lockdown itself was maybe a little shorter, but for gyms were shut down for 7 months, right? And we were heavily impacted, obviously, because not only did we try to not lose our members, so we weren't sure what to do. We thought it will be shorter, so we froze memberships for the entire period, thinking we'll open soon enough, but it just kept dragging on. And our landlord expected us to pay a certain amount of rent every month. So it was basically just an absolutely horrible experience. A lot of stress, a lot of anxiety related to the entire situation. Um, we survived the first and second lockdown actually, but towards the end it was just the numbers didn't add up anymore. Like it was becoming too much work to keep the place running, and people were scared to come back. They were taking their own sweet time, saying, okay, we'll come after a month, we'll come after 2. But every member that wasn't joining back was impacting us heavily. So yeah.
Sounds really rough.
Yes, I think that was Neha's sort of experience as a gym owner, and we're going to go into the story discussion in just a bit. Okay, so that was Neha Agarwalla and her perspective into pandemic and what she went through, which sort of relates us to story number 5 for called the meathead. And I'm gonna let Varun summarize meathead for all of our viewers.
All right. So, Meathead, or as story number 5, as we described it, is the story of a man who lived an isolated, social distance sort of life
Yeah.
even before the pandemic began. Right? He was somebody who basically had no friends, had no life outside his house, had a work from home job. So
Mhm.
he never interacted with anybody socially. He never really spoke to anybody. He lived by himself in all senses of the word. Right.
That's right.
But one day he found this flyer for this gym, and on impulse he went there. And in that gym, a gym that was staying open during the pandemic and which refused to shut down, he found a place where people accepted him,
Mhm.
even though they were toxic and terrible people, even though they were people who refused to comply with norms, who were probably spreading illness, who
Mhm.
were in effect outliers from society.
Yeah,
They still
exactly.
provided him a home and accepted him. So
Right.
they provided him a space in which he could mold himself and a way in which he could mold himself without actually without actually having to make an effort to introspect and find who he really was.
Yeah, I think yeah, that puts it really sort of puts it together really well because our protagonist, as one said, starts off essentially as an introvert, and this is well into the pandemic. This goes where everyone is aware of the dangers of the pandemic. Everyone knows how it's all a lockdown. People are constantly sanitizing, wearing gloves, masks, all of that. So, and then we have Matt, who's the gym owner. So Arun, why don't you tell us a little bit about Mac's character and how he's essentially portrayed to be opposed to what we had Neha telling us. You know, she shut down her gym and they weren't working for almost 7 months, whereas Mac here kept his gym open and um, he is allowing everyone and anyone in, and there's no sort of restriction over there. So, what was? Just tell us a little bit about his character.
Mac, as the name implies, is basically a man's man, right? He is the epitome of toxic masculinity, so to speak.
Right.
He has decided within himself that he will not do anything that seems cowardly or weak, right? Even if it makes him seem selfish, right? Neha made the brave and responsible decision to shut down her gym and to bear the consequences of it, whatever it may have been, right? But Mac refused to do that, putting people at risk and inciting others to put themselves at risk just so that he could feed his own ego and his own sense of superiority to everyone else. And he pulled in our protagonist to do the same. He pulled in our protagonist uh, to feed their own misguided sense of ego, just in a bid to be accepted. Right? He decided that he would be a beacon for he would be a beacon for bullshit. Let's put it that way, so that people would come to him just so that they could feel a little better, even if it was not the healthiest choice. Ironic, which because he's a gym owner, right? He was promoting supremely unhealthy choices being a gym owner.
Gym owner, exactly. That and his character in the entire story is so poignant. The influence he has on our protagonist is so severe that someone who is so afraid of sort of going out, he doesn't even sort of want to go get groceries. He's even so careful about his grocery shop when he's going grocery shopping that, and then there's this whole big transformation that happens due to Mac, where this person is now going to a gym full of people in the midst of a pandemic not wanting to wear a mask, and so much so that this protagonist of ours has the ability to convert probably someone else into becoming someone like him. So what did you envision? You envision Mac to do that in the first place? Did you envision him to be that sort of a character who, you know, brings out that change in that personality? Because it's a really big change, and for Mac to be able to do that, it's a lot. So, what was your thought process
I
there?
mean, yeah, the whole idea was the transformation. And if you remember correctly, for the readers watching, this was actually the first story I sent Pranika in the
That's right.
series. Yes,
That was.
because because the idea at the very beginning was that people become more themselves, right? Like we discussed in our very first discussion. Yeah. So Mac is able to do this because he provides a sense of belonging, right?
That's right.
A sense of belonging is more important than anything else. It's the reason that people go into cults. It's a reason that people on a smaller scale even go into religions, right? They feel a sense of belonging. They feel a sense of community. They feel a sense that they matter somewhere, right? And that matters to a human being more than anything, especially a human being who has been cut off from the rest of the
From the
world,
rest of the world, yes.
which is exactly what happens here. The protagonist, who by the way is nameless. Nobody except for one character in the entire series has their real name.
Name,
Yeah,
that's right.
everyone else either has pseudonyms, nicknames, short forms, or no names. There's only one character who has a proper name in the whole series. Yeah.
That's right.
So our nameless protagonist again is now given the chance to belong somewhere, which is something they've wanted their entire life, and that's worth any other risk that can be seen anywhere else.
Yeah, right. I mean, you put it so well because looking at the transition, and I think this was the first thing, since it was the very first story that we had in the series at when we were first looking at the editorial process. it was quite interesting to sort of look at how this character then changed and how Mac almost becomes like a guardian or protector for him. So lots of changes, lots of workings with the head when it comes to it. But again, I want to pose the question to you and a concluding question. What was your inspiration for this story?
So it's not so much as inspiration, but it's a common question we have, right? Like when you have a person who has been indoctrinated into a cult, or who is doing something that seems so counter to what society generally is doing, why are they doing that, right? That is a question people have, like,
That's right.
why would someone do this, right? And I wanted to try and answer that question from a perspective that is often something that I write about, which is a feminist perspective, which is the perspective of masculinity, right? How patriarchy affects masculinity. And so the cult of masculinity is such that it can bring in people who feel isolated and lonely, and give them a sense of belonging, like I said again. And so I wanted to portray that, how the pandemic allowed people in power, even minor power, to manipulate those who are vulnerable. And that's sort of a theme throughout the series as well. How people who have influence of any kind use it then to manipulate other people to their for their own needs and selfish needs. And while you may not agree with their viewpoint or believe in their viewpoint, my goal was to make you understand why they did the things that they did. It ultimately is empathy, and empathy for both the victims and empathy for the perpetrators. Even if you hate them or consider them villains, you're never going to change them if you don't understand.
Yeah, wow. Okay. That was quite a deep dive into human nature. I think the
And
series is a deep dive into human nature.
don't put them off reading it, Pranika. It's really fun and funny. There's no deep insights. There's
No,
nothing. It's
none
great.
whatsoever. But we've seen we have our protagonist and we have Mac and lots happening in the meantime. And I would actually like to ask our readers if they see any themes as they read it, any questions they have, definitely to post it in the comments, ask Varun. But that was it for this episode of the Reading Room, and we'll be back with the next story and many more interesting discussions. Thank you. Bye bye.